The world has a way of throwing its hardest punches at the people who least deserve them. But if you're lucky enough to have someone like my mother, Elaine Turner, in your corner, you learn early on that even the harshest blows can be weathered. I suppose that's where my story begins, looking at my mom and seeing a woman who, despite everything, always stood tall. At 61, my mom had seen more than her share of life's cruelty. She lost her husband when I was just a baby, Caleb barely old enough to crawl, and the weight of raising two boys on her own was heavier than anyone could imagine. But she never flinched, not even once. "Life doesn't care if you're tired, son," she'd say, the words rolling off her tongue like a mantra. "It keeps going whether you can keep up or not. So you find a way to keep moving." I remember watching her in the kitchen of our small, rundown apartment in the suburbs of Chicago. The clock on the wall would tick steadily as she prepared dinner, not just for us, but for a whole family that had no choice but to lean on her strength. A can of beans, a few potatoes, some rice. Dinner was never much, but it was enough. Or at least that's what she made us believe. Sometimes I could see the tiredness in her eyes, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she never let it show. Not to us. My mom's routine was a finely tuned machine. She'd wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, prepare our lunches, pack our school bags, and leave for the factory where she worked, back-breaking work on the assembly line. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I don't know how she did it. I mean, I know it was because she had to. But there was something in the way she moved, in the way she spoke to people. Her warmth, her kindness, even on days when she had nothing left to give, that made me believe that no matter how hard it got, she would always be there for us. The first time I noticed just how strong she was when I was about 11. Caleb had just turned 3, and I had a lot more responsibility than any kid should. One Saturday, we were playing outside when I noticed my mom coming home late, her hair wild and sweat staining her clothes. She was carrying a box of groceries and a bag full of work orders. The lines on her face seemed deeper than usual. But it wasn't just the physical exhaustion that struck me. It was how she walked, slowly, deliberately, but never with a hint of defeat, like she was the rock that kept everything else together, even though she was cracked and chipped and worn on the edges. She had worked a double shift that day, which meant she'd been at the factory since 6 in the morning, hadn't eaten all day, and had only just gotten off at 10 p.m. She didn't complain, not once. I remember how she smiled when she saw us outside, how she made her way over to the front porch, even though I knew she could barely keep her eyes open. "Marcus," she said softly, "you're getting to be a big boy now. You gotta help your mama, okay?" At that moment, I realized that she was more than just our mother. She was everything. She was the foundation of our home, and without her, we wouldn't be who we were. The story of my mother starts long before I was born. It begins with her own mother, who raised Elaine in a small town in Mississippi. Her mother, Clara, was a woman of steel, teaching Elaine the importance of hard work and never giving up. My grandmother, despite all her struggles, made sure Elaine understood that the world owed you nothing, and if you wanted something, you had to go after it. But life had other plans for my mom. Elaine met my father, James Turner, when she was just 20, and they fell in love quickly. For a while, it seemed like everything was perfect. They had dreams of a big house, a white picket fence, and a life filled with love. But after Caleb was born, things changed. James had always been a man of dreams, but it wasn't long before his ambition gave way to the cruel reality of life. He couldn't handle the pressure, couldn't handle the responsibility of being a father. So, he left. It's strange to think about now, but I don't remember being angry with him for leaving. I guess that's because I didn't fully understand what it meant to be a man, to be a father. All I knew was that my mother loved us in a way I couldn't even begin to comprehend. She became both mother and father to us, and though it wasn't fair, it was how it had to be. And yet, I could always tell that she missed him, that she was lonely. But again, she never showed it. She buried her heartache so deep, it didn't even have a chance to see the light of day. That's why, when Caleb turned 6 months old and my mom had just finished a double shift, I remember waking up in the middle of the night to find her sitting at the kitchen table. She wasn't crying, but her shoulders were slumped, her hands shaking as she held a cup of coffee. I remember asking her if she was okay. She smiled, of course, because that was what she always did when she didn't want me to see her hurting. "I'm just tired, sweetheart," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I'm just tired." I didn't know then what I know now, how far she would go for us, how much she would give up, how much of herself she would sacrifice just to make sure that Caleb and I had a better life than she had. At the factory, they didn't care how tired she was. They didn't care if she had a sick child at home or a husband who had walked out on her. They paid her what they paid her, and they expected her to do her job and do it well. It wasn't a glamorous job. There were no medals for working the assembly line, no thank yous at the end of a long shift. It was just the harsh reality of life, and Elaine learned to live with it, to make the best of it. But at home, when we'd sit around the kitchen table after dinner, she would make it all seem okay. She would laugh, would tell us stories about her childhood, her dreams for the future. There was always something about her that made me feel like the world wasn't as bad as it seemed. I grew up with my mother's strength as the backdrop of my life, and in many ways, I never fully understood how deep that strength ran until I grew older. But in those early years, I knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened, no matter how difficult life got, my mother would always be there, carrying the weight of the world for me. And that's where this story truly begins, at the kitchen table in our little apartment, where a woman who had every reason to break down kept fighting, kept going. For me, for Caleb, for all of us. The mornings were always the hardest. The kind of mornings where the cold of winter nipped at your skin before you even stepped outside, and the grogginess in your body reminded you that sleep was a luxury you simply couldn't afford. Elaine Turner had never been one to shy away from hard work, but the weight of it all, raising two kids on her own after her husband had abandoned them, had a way of testing even the strongest woman's resolve. I remember her waking up at the crack of dawn every single day, the same tired routine that had become a part of who she was. The soft hum of the coffee maker, the clatter of pots and pans as she prepared our breakfasts, the quick kiss on my forehead as she pulled on her jacket, ready to leave for another long day at the factory. I had learned early that no matter how early it was, no matter how much sleep I'd missed, the sound of her moving around the house always made me feel safe. It was a sound that signified that everything, no matter how bad it seemed, was going to be okay. "Marcus, you're in charge while I'm gone," she would say in that calm, steady voice of hers. It was a voice that always made me feel like I could handle anything. I would nod dutifully, though at 12 I was hardly equipped to handle much. But she needed me to be strong, and so I tried my best to be. She had a way of making me feel like I was the man of the house, even though I was just a boy. A boy trying to fill shoes too big for me. The factory where my mom worked was a long way from home, but that didn't stop her. She would walk, rain or shine, snow or heat, day after day, just to put food on the table. The walk was a good half hour, and every time she left, I couldn't help but worry. I watched her until she turned the corner, heading down the street, and the sight of her walking away from me never got any easier. But I knew she would always come back. It was just how things worked. She worked hard, came home exhausted, and then did it all over again the next day. We didn't have much, not in terms of material wealth anyway. We had what we needed, barely. There were nights when we had to stretch the food out to make sure we didn't go to bed hungry, or when the electricity would go out because we couldn't pay the bill that month. I remember when Caleb had just turned 6 months old, I was already starting to feel the strain. My mom never let us see it, though. She always made sure we had something to eat, even if it meant she went without. The toughest part wasn't the physical exhaustion, though. The hardest part was the emotional toll. It was the quiet evenings after dinner when Caleb had finally fallen asleep, and I'd be in my room trying to do homework by the dim light of the living room lamp. I could hear her in the kitchen, washing dishes or folding laundry, the rhythmic sounds of her movements mixing with the quiet buzz of the old refrigerator. She never complained, not once, even though I knew she must have been exhausted. I knew she missed having a partner to help her shoulder the load. I'd catch her looking out the window sometimes, staring at the street like she was waiting for something, anything, to change, but nothing ever did. Not until one fateful evening when everything changed. It was a Saturday, the day I'd usually take Caleb to the park while Mom caught up on chores. But that day, she'd come home early from work. I remember that moment like it was yesterday. The door creaked open and she stepped inside, her face pale. There was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, something fragile, something that said she wasn't as invincible as she had always appeared. She dropped her purse on the table and slumped into a chair. "Marcus, come here for a second," she said, her voice shaky, a slight tremor I had never heard before. I set down Caleb's toys and walked over to her, my heart starting to pound in my chest. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her hands were clenched together as though holding onto something she was too afraid to let go. "Marcus, it's the factory." She paused, trying to find the right words. "They're cutting back. I won't have enough hours. They're letting some of us go." I don't remember what happened next, just that the world suddenly seemed a lot darker. I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to say, not knowing what to do. My mom, the woman who had always been our rock, the woman who had worked herself to the bone for us, was now facing the kind of fear I had never seen in her eyes before. "Mom, it'll be okay," I said, though even I didn't believe it. "We'll figure something out." She smiled at me, a sad, tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm doing my best, but sometimes it's just not enough." I had never seen her so vulnerable, and it terrified me, but there was nothing I could do. Not really. At the time, I didn't fully understand the weight of what she was facing. I didn't realize just how deep the cracks in our foundation were until they started to show. From that point on, everything changed. Mom was never the same. She tried to hide it, but I could see the exhaustion creeping in. The late nights, the frantic calls looking for any job that would give her a chance, the nights when she'd sit in the kitchen, staring at the bills with a look of defeat that I couldn't erase from my memory. But she never gave up. She couldn't. There were two boys to take care of, a house to maintain, and a life to keep afloat. It wasn't long before she found a new job at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. She worked double shifts, sometimes coming home at midnight, only to wake up at 5 to do it all over again. Every morning, I'd hear the same sounds, her footsteps, the soft murmur of the coffee maker, and the faint, ever-present hum of survival. "Marcus, take care of Caleb while I'm gone," she'd say as always. And I did, I had to. But deep down, I knew that my mom was a woman who carried more than she should have. A woman who had been dealt the hardest hand life could give, but still played every card with the grace and dignity that I would come to realize was her true strength. I never told her this, but I think she knew. I think she knew just how much we relied on her, how much we needed her to keep going, even when she felt like she couldn't take another step. And she did. She kept going. For us, for me, for Caleb. And though she would never admit it, she did it alone. Life had a way of keeping you on your toes, especially when you least expected it. Just when I thought things couldn't get any harder, they did. But sometimes, when things were at their absolute lowest, life had a funny way of surprising you with an unexpected hand reaching out. I was sitting on the couch one afternoon, Caleb asleep in his room, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't like Mom to get visitors during the day. She was at the diner by then, working another double shift. I figured it was just some door-to-door salesman, but when I opened the door, I was taken aback by who was standing there. A tall man, probably in his late 40s, dressed in a sharp suit. His shoes gleamed in the sunlight, and his hair was neatly combed, not a strand out of place. He stood there, smiling politely, holding a briefcase in one hand. "Good afternoon, young man," he said in a smooth, rich voice that caught me off guard. "I'm Michael Hamilton. I believe your mother works at the diner down on Fifth. Is she home?" I frowned, unsure of what to make of him. I had never seen him around before, and it wasn't like Mom to invite strangers to the house. Still, something about him felt different. Maybe it was his calm demeanor or the way he carried himself, but I instinctively knew he wasn't just another salesman. "She's not here right now," I said cautiously, "but can I help you with something?" He seemed to consider this for a moment before responding, his expression warm and polite. "Well, I'm actually here on business. It's about your brother, Marcus." My heart skipped a beat at the mention of my name. "Marcus?" I repeated, confused. "What does this have to do with me?" Michael smiled again, and this time there was something more genuine about it. He stepped back slightly, giving me space to breathe. I'm in the business of helping young people with potential, and I've seen that Marcus has a lot of it. I blinked, unsure of how to process what he was saying. You've seen Marcus? How? I happened to be at the diner the other night, Michael explained. I was there on a quick business trip, and I overheard him talking about his aspirations, about his music. He has something special, Marcus, talent, and I'd like to help him. I was still trying to wrap my head around this when he continued. I'm not just talking about a handout. I've seen what your mom has been going through, and I want to offer Marcus a scholarship, a chance to study music, to learn and grow. He deserves it. And your family, well, you all deserve a break. His words were kind, almost too kind, and for a moment I couldn't decide if this was some kind of charity or something more. Something felt off about the way he was talking, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't asking for anything in return. He was simply offering help, something I hadn't felt much of in the past few years. Why would you do that for us? I asked, still hesitant. I mean, why Marcus? Michael paused for a moment and his expression softened. I believe in giving people opportunities when they are earned. Your mother has worked hard, and it's clear she's doing everything she can for you too. But I know it's tough, so I want to give Marcus a chance. He's got talent, I can see it. I still wasn't sure what to make of him. The suddenness of the offer, the unexpected timing, it all felt too good to be true. But at the same time, I couldn't deny that Marcus had been struggling. We both had. The thought of him having a real opportunity to go to school, to learn music, to get out of this endless cycle of work and exhaustion, it sounded like a dream. What does Marcus have to do? I asked, my voice quieter now. To get this scholarship? It's simple, Michael said, his smile growing wider. All he needs to do is meet with me, talk about his goals, and if we both feel it's the right fit, I'll take care of the rest. Tuition, instruments, lessons, you name it, it's all covered. I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was too much to hope for. But I didn't want to let the chance slip by, not for Marcus. He deserved this. He deserved something better than this broken down apartment and the unending grind of survival that defined our daily lives. Can I talk to my mom about this first? I asked, the words coming out of my mouth before I could think them through. Michael's face softened with understanding. Of course, but she'll need to make a decision soon. The scholarship offer is for this upcoming semester. I nodded, still unsure of what to make of it all. I'll talk to her, but thank you for coming by. No problem at all, Marcus. I'll be in touch. With that, he turned and walked down the steps, leaving me standing there, my mind racing with possibilities. By the time Mom came home that evening, I was pacing the living room, waiting for her to walk through the door. I didn't know how to bring it up. How do you tell your mom that a stranger just offered to change your life? When she stepped inside, her tired smile greeted me. Hey, Marcus, how was your day? It was okay, I said, still trying to find the right words. But, something happened today. This guy came by, Michael Hamilton. I could see the shift in her expression, though. She froze for a second, her hand still on the doorknob. Michael Hamilton, what did he want? I hesitated, then told her everything, the offer, the scholarship, the chance for Marcus to study music. I could tell from the look on her face that she didn't know whether to be thrilled or suspicious. What do you think, Mom? I asked nervously. She took a long breath and sat down heavily on the couch. It sounds too good to be true, Marcus. People don't just offer scholarships like that. There's always something in return. I don't know, Mom. I mean, he didn't ask for anything. He just wants to help, I said, trying to reassure her. Mom rubbed her eyes, the weight of the day finally catching up with her. I know, baby, but people don't do things for free, especially not someone like him. You need to be careful. This world has a way of making promises that it doesn't always keep. I nodded, understanding her hesitation, but something in me felt like this was a turning point for all of us. We'll think about it, Mom said finally, but I want you to be sure, Marcus. I want you to think this through. Don't make decisions because it's what you want to hear. Make them because it's right. And with that, the decision hung in the air. The possibility of something better. The possibility of Marcus having a future outside the confines of this life. A chance to make something of himself. But I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. We had a lot to consider, and nothing in our lives had ever come without complications. The truth was, Michael Hamilton's offer could change everything, or it could be the first step in a very different kind of trouble. but for the first time in a long time, I could feel a spark of hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something good. The days that followed Michael Hamilton's visit felt like a blur of uncertainty. I kept replaying his words over and over in my head, trying to make sense of them, trying to figure out what his intentions were. He seemed genuine, almost too genuine. I didn't know whether to feel grateful for the opportunity he was offering us or suspicious of his sudden appearance in our lives. Mom hadn't said much since that evening. She'd been distracted, tired, nothing out of the ordinary, really. But I could sense a change in her. She wasn't the same when we talked about it. She kept her thoughts to herself, her eyes clouded with doubt as if she were searching for something she wasn't sure she'd find. Maybe it was the way she carried herself when she talked about Michael, as if she were trying to convince herself that the offer wasn't just some kind of trap. I didn't blame her. I knew she'd seen more than her fair share of people trying to take advantage of us. It's a hard world when you're a single mother, struggling to keep your family afloat. And Michael Hamilton? He was an enigma, wealthy, polished, yet so focused on helping a family he barely knew. No one does that for free, right? But there was something about Marcus. He had always been a dreamer, and I'd seen the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his music, the way his fingers danced across the keyboard when he thought no one was watching. It was his escape, his way out of the suffocating reality of our lives. If anyone deserved a shot, it was him. I watched him on the night of the meeting with Michael, as he sat at the kitchen table, hunched over his homework, his mind clearly elsewhere. Every now and then he'd glance over at me, as if searching for some kind of reassurance I couldn't give him. Mom, he said, finally breaking the silence. I've been thinking about Michael's offer. I mean, really thinking about it. I set down the dish I'd been cleaning and turned to face him. What do you think? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, neutral. Inside, I was anxious, but I didn't want him to feel pressured. I don't know. Part of me wants to take it, you know? It's everything I've dreamed of, he said, his voice carrying the hope that always surfaced when he talked about his music. But the other part of me is scared. Like, what if there's something I'm not seeing? I nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Marcus had always been a good kid, but like most teenagers, he was torn between chasing his dreams and staying grounded in reality. Reality was what we had, what we needed. Dreams were nice, but they didn't put food on the table. You don't have to decide right now, Marcus, I said, trying to soothe his nerves. I'm just glad you're thinking carefully about it. He let out a deep breath, clearly struggling with the decision. I've never had a chance like this, Mom. What if I mess it up? What if I take it and it's not really what I thought it was? I could see his doubts, his fear of failure. I knew that fear all too well. It wasn't just the fear of making the wrong choice, it was the fear of letting go of everything you knew and stepping into the unknown. We'd both been there before. Life had a way of teaching you that nothing comes easy, especially when it seemed like you had the world stacked against you. I'm proud of you for thinking it through, Marcus, but you don't have to carry this on your own, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Whatever decision you make, I'll be here. You don't have to be afraid of making a mistake. We'll figure it out together. That was when the door opened. The sound of it, that familiar creak, made me look up. Mom had just come in from her shift at the diner, and the exhaustion in her face was all too apparent. She looked as if she hadn't slept in days, but she still managed to smile as she set her purse down on the table. "How are we doing in here?" she asked, though I could see the way her gaze flicked over to Marcus. She'd been waiting for him to bring it up again, just like I had. "I've been thinking about it, Mom," Marcus said quietly, meeting her eyes. "I don't know what to do. Michael Hamilton wants to help me with a scholarship. He said he'd pay for everything, school, instruments, lessons. But I don't know if I can trust him. I don't know if this is real." Mom's expression didn't change immediately, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She placed her jacket over the back of the chair and sat down heavily. "I've been thinking about it too," she said, her voice softer than usual. "And I'm not going to lie, Marcus, I'm torn. On one hand, it sounds like a dream come true. On the other hand," she paused, her words hanging in the air, "it just feels too good to be true." Marcus nodded. "That's what I thought, but what if it's the break we've been waiting for?" I watched as they exchanged looks, both of them searching for answers, for certainty, but there was none to be found. There was no clear path ahead, no perfect solution. Only the unknown. You've worked so hard for this, Marcus, Mom said, finally breaking the silence. And I know you want this, but you have to think about the consequences. What's it going to cost us? What's it going to cost you? Marcus looked at her, then at me, as if searching for the answer we couldn't give. His eyes were wide, vulnerable. What do you think, Mom? Should I do it? I looked at him, my heart aching for him, for the burden he was carrying. He was my son, my responsibility, but he was also a young man who needed to make his own choices. And whatever decision he made, I knew it wouldn't be easy. You've got to follow your heart, Marcus, I said quietly. But make sure it's your heart and not just the dream of an easy way out. Nothing's ever as simple as it seems. Just be careful, okay? He nodded, and for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of peace in his eyes. The weight didn't seem as heavy as before, and I could tell that for now he was okay. He wasn't completely sure of what he was going to do, but at least now he had a clearer sense of where to go from here. But I knew deep down that no matter what choice he made, things were about to change, and whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. The days after our conversation felt like they were suspended in time. Everything seemed to slow down, each hour stretching longer than the last as Marcus wrestled with his decision. He would sit in his room, headphones on, lost in his music, as if drowning out the world around him, trying to escape the weight of the choice that loomed over him. I could see it in his eyes, the tension, the uncertainty, the battle between hope and fear. The kind of fear that can paralyze you, the fear of stepping into something new, something unknown. I could feel it too, the fear of change. I knew it well, had lived with it for years. After all, I had my own reasons to be afraid. Afraid of failure, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of being let down by people who had no real investment in us. And yet, when it came to Marcus, I couldn't bear to see him locked in this struggle. I wanted so badly for him to succeed, to have the chance I never did. But I also knew that life had a way of taking things from you when you least expected it. I spent the next few days in a quiet panic. I could tell Marcus wasn't going to make this decision alone. I didn't want to pressure him, but I couldn't stop myself from asking him every night, "Have you decided yet?" I tried to mask the worry in my voice, tried to act like I wasn't holding my breath. "I'm still thinking, Mom," he'd say each time, his voice a little quieter than the last. "I'll know when I'm ready." The silence between us grew, a tension that hung thick in the air. It wasn't that we weren't talking, it was that we were talking in circles, and neither of us could find the right words. He didn't want to disappoint me, and I didn't want to push him too hard. We were both caught in the same place, on the edge of something new, but afraid to step into it. Then the phone rang. It was Michael Hamilton again. I hadn't expected him to call so soon. After the last meeting, I thought he'd give us space, let us make up our minds. But there he was, his voice smooth as ever, sounding confident, like he had everything figured out and just wanted us to catch up. "Good evening, Elaine. It's Michael Hamilton. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time." I swallowed hard. "No, not at all. What's on your mind?" "I just wanted to follow up on our last conversation. I understand you've had some time to think about my offer, and I wanted to extend a formal invitation to meet again." Marcus still seems like a very promising young man. I'd really like to make this happen for him if he's willing. His words were kind, but I could feel something behind them, an urgency, a quiet pressure I hadn't picked up on before. I didn't want to sound dismissive, but the doubt in my gut was growing. The idea of Marcus being swept into this world of promises and opportunities was tempting, but it also felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. "I'll talk to Marcus, Michael," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "But we're still deciding. I don't want to rush into anything." Of course, take your time," he replied smoothly. "I just wanted to make sure you knew the offer still stands. I'd hate for Marcus to miss out on this opportunity." Before I could respond, he added, "If you decide to go forward, I'll personally ensure everything is arranged. No details will be left out. Marcus deserves this chance. He has real potential, Elaine." The way he said it, like he truly believed in Marcus, sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just a scholarship he was offering. It was an entire future. The kind of future I never imagined for us, the kind I never thought we'd have. I hung up the phone and stood there for a long moment, the quiet in the house pressing down on me. I felt the weight of the decision pressing on my shoulders. Could I trust this man? Could I trust that he was really offering Marcus a chance to succeed and not just pulling us into something we couldn't escape? I had always been a skeptic, always looked for the catch, the hidden motive. It was how I'd survived, by trusting no one, by keeping my guard up. But now I had to make a decision. And so did Marcus. When he came home that night, I could tell he was restless. He had been pacing around the house, his brow furrowed as if he were on the verge of some great realization. He didn't look like the boy I had raised. He looked like a man, burdened by the weight of what was ahead. I talked to Michael, I said quietly as we both sat at the kitchen table. He wants us to meet again to make things official. Marcus didn't immediately respond. He just stared at the table, his fingers tracing the edge of the wood, lost in thought. Mom, he said after a long pause, what if this is the only chance I get? What if this is my shot and I don't take it? The desperation in his voice hit me like a wave. I could hear the fear in his words, the fear of failure, the fear of living his whole life without ever trying, without ever getting the chance to prove himself. I knew that fear. I had lived with it for years. I know how you feel, Marcus, I said softly. But I also know how hard this life has been for us. And I don't want you to get caught up in someone else's dream, someone else's vision of what your life should be. He turned to face me then, his eyes burning with determination. But this is my dream, Mom. It's what I've wanted, all I've ever wanted. I cut him off, not out of anger, but out of the need to make him understand. I know, baby, I know, I want this for you too, but you need to think about what it's going to cost you. This is about more than just the opportunity. It's about the kind of person you want to be, the kind of life you want to live. Don't let anyone, especially someone like Michael Hamilton, decide that for you. He was quiet again, the room filled with nothing but the sound of his breathing. I could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. Part of him wanted to take the leap. Part of him was terrified of what might happen if he did. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I'm not ready, Mom? What if I screw it up? You're not going to screw it up, Marcus, I said firmly. Not if you take your time. Not if you don't let anyone rush you into something you're not sure about. You have time, and no matter what you decide, I'll be here, but I need you to think carefully. This isn't just about a scholarship, it's about what happens after. Marcus nodded, his eyes locked onto mine. I will, Mom, I promise. For the first time in a long while, I felt like he was starting to make sense of it all. He wasn't rushing into anything. He was going to take his time, weigh the options, and make his own decision. The way he looked at me with that quiet resolve made me believe that maybe, just maybe, he was ready. Ready to take the first step towards something bigger than either of us had imagined. But I also knew that this decision would change everything. One way or another, we were on the verge of something new, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant. The following days felt like a countdown to something inevitable, something that neither Marcus nor I could escape. The tension in the house was palpable, thick in the air like an invisible storm cloud. Marcus was quieter than usual, his mind consumed by the looming decision, and I found myself lost in my own thoughts, weighing the pros and cons of Michael Hamilton's offer, wondering if I was doing the right thing by allowing Marcus to even consider it. As the weekend approached, I could see that Marcus was no closer to a decision. He would sit at the kitchen table, his textbooks open but unread, his fingers drumming absent-mindedly on the pages. His mind was far away, caught between two worlds. One, where he stayed with us, grounded in the life we had; the other, where everything could change, the world he had dreamed of. On Saturday morning, after a night of restless sleep, I walked into the kitchen to find Marcus sitting at the table, staring at the unopened letter from Michael Hamilton. It had been lying there for a couple of days, an ominous presence, the final decision waiting to be made. His fingers traced the edge of the envelope, his expression unreadable. You haven't opened it yet, I said, my voice a little more anxious than I intended. He didn't look up immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the letter, as if it held the key to some answer he hadn't yet found. I don't know what to do, Mom, he said, his voice soft, almost like a confession. I've been thinking about it nonstop. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough for whatever he's offering? I took a deep breath and sat down next to him. I could feel the heaviness in his words, the weight of his self-doubt. Marcus, I want you to listen to me for a second. You are good enough. I've seen what you can do. I've seen the way you play, I know this is hard, and I know you're scared, but you can't let fear control you. I've spent my whole life being afraid of not being enough, afraid of not making the right choices. But you can't live like that. You have to choose for yourself. He shifted in his seat, and I could tell he was struggling with the pressure, not just from the scholarship, but from the expectations he had placed on himself. What if this isn't the right path, Mom? What if I'm just chasing a dream that's not meant to be? I placed my hand on his, steadying it, grounding both of us in the moment. Listen to me, I said gently but firmly. You've always had dreams, Marcus. You've always wanted more. You can't let fear of failing stop you from chasing them, and even if it doesn't turn out the way you expect, well, that's part of life. The point is you have to try, you have to step out there and see what happens. You'll never know unless you do. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. The kind of silence that only happens when something significant is hanging in the balance, when everything is about to change. Finally, Marcus looked at me, his eyes still uncertain but filled with a quiet resolve I hadn't seen before. You really think I should do this, Mom? I think you should make the decision that feels right to you, I said, but don't let fear be the reason you walk away from it. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. I'll meet with him. I'll take the chance. It wasn't the grand, confident declaration I had imagined, but it was enough. He was ready. Not completely sure, but ready to take that first step. And for me, that was all I needed. He didn't have to have all the answers right now. What mattered was that he was willing to try. The next day, we drove to Michael Hamilton's office in downtown Chicago. I hadn't been to that part of the city in years, and as we drove through the bustling streets, I could feel the unease settle in my chest. It wasn't just the towering buildings or the polished cars that intimidated me. It was the fact that this was the world Marcus was about to step into, a world so far removed from our own. We parked in a sleek, modern parking garage, and Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he grabbed the letter Michael had sent, the one that now felt like a lifeline and a noose at the same time. Mom, what if I'm not ready for this? He asked, his voice filled with the kind of uncertainty that only comes from standing at the edge of something life-altering. I turned to him, trying to steady my own nerves. Marcus, there's no such thing as being fully ready for something like this. You just have to take the step and trust that it'll lead you where you're supposed to go. He took a deep breath, then nodded, pushing the car door open. Okay, let's go. We entered the building and took the elevator to Michael's office on the 12th floor. The space was impressive. Large windows that looked out over the city, sleek, contemporary furniture, and an air of success that almost suffocated me. I felt out of place here, like a visitor in someone else's world. Michael greeted us warmly when we arrived, his presence calm and reassuring as always. He stood up from behind his desk and extended a hand to Marcus, who shook it hesitantly. Marcus, Elaine, he said with that same practiced smile. I'm so glad we could finally meet. I'm excited to talk to you both about the opportunity I've been offering. We sat down, and Michael wasted no time diving into the details, explaining the scholarship offer in more depth, outlining the benefits, the programs, the connections Marcus would have access to. Everything sounded perfect, like something out of a dream, but it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something about this whole thing didn't sit right. As Michael talked, I kept my eyes on him, trying to read between the lines of his words, trying to see what he wasn't saying. And I'm not just offering a scholarship, Michael continued, his voice smooth and persuasive. I'm offering a chance for Marcus to grow, to really cultivate his talent, a chance to make a name for himself. This is about more than just music, it's about building a future. Marcus seemed to be listening intently, his eyes wide with possibility. I could see it, the glimmer of excitement in his eyes, the dream beginning to take shape. He was hooked, and part of me wanted to believe this was the right choice. He deserved this chance, I told myself, but as the conversation wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Michael than he was letting on. I wasn't sure what it was, but something felt off. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice quiet but clear. I want to do this, he said, his words carrying a finality to them. I'm ready, Michael smiled. I'm glad to hear that. You won't regret it. Marcus, I promise you. I couldn't stop myself from speaking up. And you're sure about this? You're really offering this without expecting anything in return? I asked, my voice unsteady despite myself. You're just trying to help him? Michael paused for a brief moment, his smile faltering just slightly. But then, with a practiced professionalism, he answered, Of course, Elaine, I want what's best for Marcus, that's all. I nodded, trying to ignore the nagging doubt that settled deeper in my gut. Maybe this was what Marcus needed. Maybe this was his shot. But as we stood to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing in a way I couldn't fully control. And I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a dangerous one. The drive back from Michael Hamilton's office felt like a blur. The skyline of downtown Chicago seemed distant, unreal. I was still processing everything Michael had said, still weighing his words in my mind. The glossy promises of opportunity, the grandiose idea of Marcus building a career in music, all of it sounded like something out of a movie. But the question I couldn't shake was, what was the cost? Marcus was quiet as we drove, lost in his own thoughts. The excitement in his eyes had faded a little, replaced by a mixture of nerves and uncertainty. I could see him grappling with the enormity of the decision he'd just made. It was one thing to dream about a future, and another to actually step into it. Mom, do you think I'm making the right choice? He asked, breaking the silence, his voice hesitant. I glanced over at him. His face was still the same, full of potential, but also full of doubt. I wasn't sure how to answer him. For so long, I'd been the one making decisions for us, deciding when to fight, when to let go, when to take a chance. But this wasn't my decision, it was his. And as much as I wanted to protect him from every mistake, every setback, I had to trust that he would figure it out. You're doing what you think is right, Marcus, I said softly, trying to steady my own doubts. And that's all I can ask, but remember, there's no such thing as the perfect choice. There's only the one you're willing to make. I'll be here, whatever happens. He nodded, but I could tell he was still wrestling with the weight of his decision. And I didn't blame him. I was doing the same thing. The next few weeks passed in a haze. Marcus threw himself into the preparation for his upcoming meeting with Michael Hamilton's team. He practiced his music, rehearsed his story, and immersed himself in the future he had imagined for so long. But the more he worked, the more I saw the pressure building on him. It was like watching a balloon slowly inflate, the tension rising with each passing day. He'd spent hours in his room, the faint sound of piano keys floating through the house, as if he were trying to prove to himself that he was ready for what was coming. But each time I checked in on him, his face seemed more strained, his eyes a little more tired. He was questioning everything now, the scholarship, the career, his worth. And I was questioning too. Michael Hamilton had become a shadow in our lives, his presence always just out of sight, waiting for us to make a final commitment. He had been patient, but I could feel the weight of his expectations growing heavier. He was a man who got things done, who made things happen, and he was determined to make Marcus one of his success stories. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that we were entering a world we didn't truly understand. Mom, I'm scared, Marcus said one night, his voice strained as he sat beside me on the couch. I looked over at him, surprised. What are you scared of? I'm scared I'll mess up, he admitted, his hands clenched together in his lap. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough to be part of all that. What if they see me as just another kid with a dream, but not enough to make it? My heart broke for him. I knew that fear, that deep-rooted terror that no matter how hard you tried, it was never going to be enough. That no matter how much talent you had, it would never be recognized. That the world would pass you by, leaving you with nothing but the remnants of a dream you couldn't reach. Marcus, I said softly, my voice filled with the calm I wished I could give him, I know you're scared. I know it feels like everything is on the line, but I want you to remember something. Being scared doesn't mean you're not ready. It means you're human, and you've got everything it takes to succeed. Don't let fear control you. He looked at me, his eyes searching, looking for something, reassurance, comfort, maybe even a little bit of hope. I could see that the uncertainty was still there, but there was something else too. A flicker of belief, however small, beginning to spark in his chest. I just don't want to disappoint you, he said quietly. You've always been there for me and I don't want to let you down. I reached over and squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words. Marcus, you could never disappoint me. You're my son, and whatever happens, I'll always be proud of you. But this is about you, not me, not anyone else. This is your chance. Don't let fear tell you you're not ready. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight, as if he were steeling himself for what was to come. I could see the resolve starting to return, like a flicker of light breaking through a dark cloud. And in that moment, I knew he was ready, not because he wasn't scared, but because he was choosing to face that fear, to take that first step, even if he didn't know where it would lead. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I expected. The morning dawned clear, but there was a heaviness in the air. It felt like the calm before a storm, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I drove Marcus to the office building once again, this time with a sense of finality. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. I could see the mix of emotions on his face as we walked into the lobby: nervousness, excitement, doubt. But above all, there was a quiet determination. He was walking into the unknown, and though he couldn't see it, there was strength in every step he took. When we reached Michael's office, we were greeted by his assistant, a woman in a sharp suit who led us to a sleek conference room. Michael was already there, standing by the window, his back to us. He turned when he heard the door open, his smile as warm as ever. "Marcus, Elaine, I'm so glad to see you again," he said smoothly. "Are you ready to talk about your future?" Marcus stood taller now, a quiet resolve in his posture as he nodded. "I'm ready." Michael nodded, his smile widening. "Excellent, let's begin." The conversation that followed felt surreal. There was a rhythm to it, a dance of words, a mix of promises, goals, and strategies. But as I listened to Michael talk, outlining his vision for Marcus's future, I couldn't help but feel like something was shifting. It wasn't just the opportunity, it was the weight of it. The weight of what Marcus was about to step into. And for the first time in a long while, I realized that the storm wasn't outside, it was inside me. I wasn't just watching Marcus take his first step into the world. I was taking one too, into a future I hadn't planned for, into a world I didn't understand. But as I looked at Marcus, sitting there with quiet confidence, his future finally within reach, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, we were in this together. And together, we would face whatever came. The weeks following Marcus's decision felt like a roller coaster, every twist and turn bringing us closer to something new, but also pushing us further from what we knew. We were in uncharted territory now, and every day seemed to bring a new layer of uncertainty, and yet also new possibility. Marcus threw himself into the preparations. It was as if the weight of his decision had breathed new life into him. Every night, I'd find him at the piano, playing until the early hours of the morning, lost in his music. He'd never played like this before, not with such urgency, such focus. It was like the scholarship offer had ignited something inside him that had been dormant, something he hadn't even known was there. At the same time, I could see how the pressure was building. He wasn't just practicing music anymore, he was working toward something bigger, toward a future he wasn't sure he was ready for. And it showed. His exhaustion was obvious. His shoulders hunched a little more, his brow furrowed with concentration. He would nod off at the dinner table some nights, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Mom," he said one evening after returning from yet another meeting with Michael Hamilton and his team, "they want me to move to Los Angeles. They're saying the program's based there." I I don't know, Mom. It's just so much. It's all happening so fast. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the dim light of the hanging lamp casting shadows across his face. It was late, and I could hear the quiet hum of the fridge, the only sound breaking the stillness. I set my spoon down slowly, trying to think through his words. "You don't have to go, Marcus. You don't have to rush into this if you're not ready." But I could see it in his eyes, the same fear, the same hunger that had been in him since he was a little boy. He didn't want to disappoint anyone. Not me, not Michael, not himself. He wanted this. I could see that he was torn between his dream and the reality of leaving everything behind, the life he knew, the family that had been there through every high and low. "Mom, they're saying this is the only way. If I want a real shot, I have to go. I'm not going to get this chance again." The way he said it so matter-of-factly hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the words. It was the realization that my son was on the verge of stepping into a world I couldn't follow. A world that didn't need me in the same way anymore. I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to steady my voice. Marcus, I'll support you whatever you decide, but just remember you don't have to do this for me or for Michael. You're doing this for you. I know, he said quietly. But what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Then you try again, I said firmly, my voice stronger than I felt. The only failure is giving up, and you're not the kind of person who gives up. There was a long silence between us, the weight of his future hanging over the conversation. Finally, he nodded, though his eyes were still full of doubt. He was still unsure, still uncertain about the next step. But one thing was clear, he was determined. The same determination I'd seen in him since he was young, when he fought for every little thing he wanted. The same determination that had kept us going all these years. A few days later, Michael Hamilton called. It wasn't unexpected, but it was a call I had been dreading. As much as I wanted Marcus to succeed, I didn't want him to be rushed into something he wasn't fully prepared for. Michael had been patient up until now, but I could hear the impatience in his voice this time. The language of urgency, of promises that felt more like expectations. Elaine, it's Michael. I wanted to check in, see how things are going. Have you talked to Marcus about the move? I could hear the smile in his voice, that smooth, practiced charm that made him so persuasive. But there was something else, too. Something I couldn't quite place, an edge, maybe. Yes, we've talked, I said, my voice steady but firm. But Marcus is still deciding. This is a big step, Michael. He's not sure he's ready to move across the country. Of course, he said, as if he hadn't heard the hesitation in my words. But Elaine, we've been discussing the logistics for weeks now. Everything is in place. Marcus has a rare opportunity here, and I want to make sure he doesn't miss it. His words were dripping with encouragement, but underneath, I could feel the subtle pressure building. I understand, I replied, my grip tightening on the phone, but I need to know he's making this decision for the right reasons, not because he feels obligated or because he thinks he has no choice. Michael's tone shifted, just slightly. Elaine, I'm doing this because I believe in Marcus. I believe he has what it takes to make it. But sometimes you have to push someone to see their potential. He's not going to get anywhere if he stays in the same place, surrounded by the same limitations. Los Angeles is where he needs to be. It's where the real opportunities are. I could hear the finality in his words, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if it was about Marcus's future or Michael's agenda. I wasn't sure if I was losing my son to a dream that wasn't his or to someone else's vision of what he should be. I appreciate everything you've done for him, Michael, I said, my voice carefully controlled. But Marcus needs to make this decision on his own. I won't push him one way or the other. I understand, Elaine, but we both know that these opportunities don't come around often. I just hope Marcus realizes that. I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the conversation settling on my chest. I had always trusted Michael's judgment, believed in the vision he had for Marcus. But now, I was starting to wonder if his vision was the right one for Marcus, or if it was just another version of the dream he was selling. When Marcus came home that evening, I could see the exhaustion in his face. The decision was wearing him down, and I knew that if he didn't make up his mind soon, the pressure would consume him. Mom, he said quietly, sitting down beside me. I've been thinking about what Michael said, about the move to LA. It's everything I've ever wanted, but I don't know if I'm ready for it. I turned to him, my heart breaking at the uncertainty in his eyes. Marcus, it's okay to be unsure. It's okay to feel like this is too much, but you're not alone in this. Whatever you choose, you're not alone. He nodded, his hand shaking slightly as he ran it through his hair. I just want to make the right choice. I don't want to mess this up. You won't, I said firmly, reaching out to touch his arm. You're going to make mistakes. We all do, but that doesn't mean it's the end. It's just a step. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you, and you're going to be okay. For a moment, I saw the flicker of relief in his eyes. The weight of his decision, if only for a brief moment, seemed to lift, but I knew that the real decision was still ahead, and it was his to make. The next day, Marcus made the call. It was quiet, just the sound of his voice, steady and sure as he spoke to Michael. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I could see it in his face, the way his posture straightened, the way the tension finally began to melt away. The decision had been made. And though I didn't know exactly where this path would lead, I knew one thing for sure. Marcus was ready. Not because he had it all figured out, but because he had taken that first step. And together, we would walk this journey, one step at a time. It was a strange kind of quiet that filled the house the day Marcus left. The kind of silence that comes after a storm has passed, but the aftermath still lingers in the air, heavy, uncertain, and yet strangely peaceful. It had been weeks since he made the final decision, weeks since he'd committed to the move to Los Angeles, to the new life that awaited him. And yet, despite all the planning, all the phone calls, all the preparation, it felt as though the reality of it hadn't quite sunk in for either of us. I watched him that morning, the bag packed at his feet, his suitcase open beside him, a few last-minute items being stuffed inside. His room had already been cleared of everything but a few lingering memories, old posters, music sheets, and the guitar he hadn't played in a while. It was a far cry from the space he had occupied all these years, the space where he had been my little boy, where he had sat at his piano, dreaming of something more. "Mom, do you think I'm doing the right thing?" He asked again, the question that had been hanging in the air for days, maybe weeks. It wasn't just the question of whether to leave, it was the question of what he was leaving behind, of what he might lose in the process. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching him as he zipped up his bag. For a moment, I could only stare at him. This young man, full of potential, full of doubt and full of fear. And for a moment, I didn't know what to say. What could I say to ease the weight of a decision this big? "You've always known what you wanted, Marcus," I said, my voice softer than usual. "You've always had that spark inside you. I've watched you chase your dreams, even when it seemed impossible. This is your chance to see where those dreams can take you, and I think that's something worth fighting for." He nodded, though the uncertainty still clouded his eyes. The fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, it was all there, pressing down on him. I could feel it too, but what could I do except remind him of what he already knew? "I just don't want to mess this up," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to let you down." My heart ached at his words. I had always tried to protect him from the pain of disappointment, tried to shield him from the reality of the world's harshness. But now, as I stood there, watching him, I realized that the only way he could grow was to face that fear head on, to take the chance. "Marcus," I said, walking into the room and sitting beside him, "you're not going to mess this up. You've been through so much already. This is just the next step, and I'll be with you every step of the way. Even if I'm not physically there, I'll be there. You're not alone in this." He looked up at me, and for the first time in days, I saw something different in his eyes, something like peace, like acceptance. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it had softened. "I'm proud of you," I said, placing my hand on his. "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. You've always been brave, Marcus. You always will be." There was a long pause, and then he pulled me into a hug. It wasn't the same hug I had given him when he was a child, full of innocence and joy. This was different, more bittersweet, more grown up. "I'm going to miss you, Mom," he said softly, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You don't have to do anything without me," I whispered, my own voice cracking. "I'll always be here, no matter where you go, always." And then, just like that, he pulled away, wiping his eyes. A small smile played on his lips, the same smile he'd had since he was little, full of determination, full of strength. "I'll keep in touch," he said, his voice more confident now. "I'll send you updates, pictures, everything, I promise." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I know you will." The next hour passed in a blur of final goodbyes, last-minute phone calls, a few hugs, some laughs to break the tension. I watched as he loaded the last of his things into the car that would take him to the airport, to the flight that would take him to Los Angeles. He stood by the door, his hand on the handle, his eyes one last time scanning the house, our home, the place that had seen so many years of struggle, love, and sacrifice. "I'll call you when I get there," he said, turning back to me. "Take care of yourself, Marcus, and don't forget, you've got everything inside you to make this work. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He smiled, a small, bittersweet smile that carried more meaning than I could put into words. Then, with one last glance, he stepped out of the door, the sound of the car engine starting up filling the space left behind. And just like that, he was gone. The house felt emptier the minute he left. It wasn't just the absence of his things, though the emptiness in his room was a stark reminder. It wasn't just the quiet, either, though that was new. It was the sudden realization that Marcus was out there in the world, chasing his dreams. The reality of him being so far away hit me harder than I expected. I sat down on the couch, the silence wrapping around me like a blanket, and I let myself feel it. I let myself feel the weight of his absence, the weight of the choice he had made, the fear and the pride that swirled inside me. He had stepped out into the unknown, and for the first time I had to let him. But as I sat there, the quiet feeling strangely comforting in its own way, I realized something. I had always been there for him, guiding him, protecting him. But now it was his turn to stand on his own. And no matter how hard it was for me to let go, I knew it was the right thing to do. It was his time. And I had done everything I could to help him get to this point. The rest was up to him. Later that evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned the color of fading memories, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. Just landed. I'm here, Mom. It's real. I'm doing it. I smiled to myself, the warmth in my chest pushing back the sadness. He was doing it. He had taken that first step. And no matter what happened next, I knew he was ready. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. He was gone, yes. But he was exactly where he needed to be. And so was I. And together, though miles apart, we would keep going. The days after Marcus left felt like a quiet kind of emptiness, one that was filled with small, subtle changes. The house, once alive with the noise of his music, his laughter, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, now felt still. The weight of his absence hung in the air, like the silence after a song ends, unsettling yet somehow peaceful. At first, I tried to keep myself busy. I spent more time at work, threw myself into my chores, and spent the evenings in the kitchen preparing meals that didn't quite taste the same without Marcus there, taking his seat at the table and asking, as he always did, "What's for dinner, Mom?" There was a kind of quiet that took over. It wasn't just the silence, it was the realization that this chapter of our lives was over. He was out there, living his dream, chasing his future. And well, I was standing still, in the space between the life we had and the life he was building without me. But as the weeks passed, I started to feel something else. A strange sense of pride mixed with a bit of loneliness. Pride because I knew he was where he needed to be. I knew that the decision he had made, to leave, to go after what he wanted, was the right one. He was growing up, stepping into the world, making choices on his own. And though I missed him terribly, I was happy for him. He was doing it. He was living the life I'd always hoped for him. And then, one afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room, the phone rang. My heart skipped when I saw the name on the screen. Marcus. I picked it up quickly. "Hey, baby, how's everything?" The voice on the other end was familiar, yet distant, as if the miles between us had already begun to change the sound of his words. But even so, I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Mom, you won't believe it. I'm starting my first recording session tomorrow." His words spilled out in a rush. "I can't believe it. It's real. It's happening." I felt a lump form in my throat, a mixture of joy and disbelief. My son was about to start his first step into the world he had dreamed of, and I couldn't be more proud. "That's amazing, Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm so proud of you. I always knew this day would come. Tell me everything. How do you feel?" He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice, even over the phone. "Honestly, scared, but in a good way. Like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. It's just a little overwhelming, but I'm ready for it. I feel like I've been working toward this moment my whole life." I smiled, a warm sense of pride swelling in my chest. "You've worked hard for this, Marcus. You've earned every bit of it." "Thanks, Mom," he said, the gratitude in his voice clear. "I couldn't have done it without you. All those nights you stayed up with me, helping me practice, listening to me play, telling me I could do it even when I didn't believe it myself. You've always been there. I can't even explain how much that's meant." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I held them back, not wanting to let him see how much I was holding inside. "You've always had it in you, Marcus," I said, my voice trembling just slightly. "I was just there to remind you of it." We talked for a while longer, catching up on everything. He told me about the city, the people he'd met, and the challenges he was already facing, how he was adjusting to the fast pace, the constant hustle, how the apartment he'd found was small but cozy, and how he missed the comfort of home but was excited to build a life of his own. And as I listened to him, I realized something. He was happy. He was scared, yes, but he was also living. He was building a life for himself, a life he had dreamed of, one that was far from the confines of the life we had known in Chicago. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, holding the phone to my chest, feeling the warmth of our conversation linger like a hug I could still feel even though we were miles apart. The weeks that followed were filled with new adjustments. Marcus sent me regular updates, photos of his new apartment, snippets of his music, messages about his sessions. I saved every single one, every small victory, every moment he shared. It wasn't just about his success, it was about his journey, the way he was learning to navigate this new life with the same courage and determination he had shown me his entire life. And I knew in my heart that he was exactly where he was meant to be. But there were moments when I missed him more than I could put into words. The silence at dinner felt heavier now. I found myself waiting for him to walk through the door, to ask me about his day, to tell me about his plans. But he was no longer here. He was in Los Angeles, creating his future, shaping his destiny. And as proud as I was, there were nights when I felt the ache of his absence, when I longed for the sound of his voice, the way he used to talk to me about everything, as if he couldn't wait to share every little detail of his life. Still, I kept pushing forward. I kept working, kept going, because that was what Marcus had taught me, that life didn't stop, no matter how much you wanted it to. And then one day there was another call. This time it was different. The voice on the other end was still Marcus's, but there was something in the way he said "Mom" that made my heart skip. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking just slightly. I got my first contract. I froze, the world outside the window blurring for a moment. "What, Marcus, are you serious?" "I'm serious. They want to sign me. I can't believe it. They love my sound. They want to work with me." I let out a shaky breath, my heart swelling with pride and disbelief. "Marcus, that's incredible. That's everything you've worked for. I'm so proud of you." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice quiet, almost uncertain. "I can't believe it, Mom. I don't think I would have gotten here without you, without everything you did for me." Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. It wasn't just pride. It was the overwhelming sense that this moment, this achievement, this milestone, was as much mine as it was his. Every sacrifice, every late night, every moment I spent supporting him, it had all led to this. "I always knew you'd get here," I said softly. "I always knew you'd make it." And for the first time since he left, I didn't feel that empty space where he used to be. Instead, I felt full. Full of love, full of pride, full of the knowledge that Marcus had made it. He had done it not just for himself, but for both of us. And so I smiled through my tears, because I knew that this was just the beginning. The world was waiting for him, and he was ready to meet it, just as I had always known he would be. It's funny how life works. It moves so fast, taking you from one moment to the next, from one chapter to the next, until you look back and realize that everything has changed. Marcus was no longer the boy who used to sit in his room, playing his music until the early hours of the morning. He was now the man who had taken his dreams and made them real. He was building a future in Los Angeles, one session at a time, one song at a time. But for me, the change wasn't just about Marcus's success. It was about what that success meant for both of us. For so long, I had been the one holding everything together. I had been the mother, the protector, the one who made sure we didn't fall apart. But now, as Marcus stood on his own, taking his first steps in the world he had always dreamed of, I realized that I too had made it. I had raised him to be strong, to follow his own path, to live his truth. And watching him now, I knew that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment I'd spent helping him get here had been worth it. There was a peace that came with that realization, a quiet sense of accomplishment, not just for him, but for me too. I wasn't just his mother anymore. I was someone who had helped shape the person he had become. I was the woman who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. I was the one who had helped him take that first step into the unknown. And that was enough. It was more than enough. The months went by, and though there were still days when I missed him more than I could bear, I found myself filled with a quiet pride. I kept in touch with Marcus, of course, texts, phone calls, photos, updates about his latest sessions, his new songs, his growing fan base. And with each call, I felt more and more like I was a part of his journey, even if I wasn't physically there beside him. One evening, few months after his contract was signed, I received a video message from Marcus. I opened it, smiling before I even clicked play, knowing that whatever he sent, it would be something special. He appeared on the screen, a wide grin on his face, standing in a recording studio. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "I just wanted to send you this. I'm recording my first album. It's official, and I can't believe it. I wanted you to be the first to know. This is all for you. Thank you for believing in me. I know this is just the beginning, and I'm gonna keep working hard to make you proud." I wiped the tears away before they could fall. I didn't need to hear the words. I didn't need to see the studio, the album covers, the fans. I already knew. I already knew that he had made it, and that was enough. The phone rang a few weeks later. It was an early morning call, one that I had been half expecting but wasn't quite ready for. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice bright, almost too happy to be real. "I just got nominated for a Grammy, for Best New Artist." I froze, my heart stopped for a beat before it started again, faster this time, as if it couldn't keep up with the flood of emotions that washed over me. "You did what?" I said, unable to process the words. "A Grammy? Marcus, I can't even?" "Yeah, I know it's crazy," he laughed. "But I couldn't have done it without you. You were the one who taught me to keep going, to never give up. And I swear I'm still doing it for you." I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands shaking as I clutched the phone, unable to find the right words. What could I say? What could I say to a son who had just taken everything we had worked for and turned it into a dream realized? "You're amazing," I said finally, my voice thick with tears. "You've always been amazing, and I'm so proud of you, Marcus. I can't even begin to explain how proud I am." That night, after I hung up the phone, I sat in silence for a long time. The house felt different now. The silence was still there, but it wasn't the kind of silence that had filled the space after Marcus left. This was the kind of silence that came with contentment, with the knowledge that everything had come full circle. He had stepped into the world and he had made his mark. And I had done my part. I had been there every step of the way. As I looked out the window, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, I thought about everything we had been through. All the struggles, all the sacrifices, all the doubts. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. None of it had been in vain. The love, the hard work, the pain, it had all been worth it because it had led to this moment. To the readers, to those who have been with us on this journey, I want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our story, to follow Marcus's journey from a dream to reality. I hope you find something in his story, something that resonates with you in your own life, whether it's the power of perseverance, the importance of family, or the strength that comes from believing in yourself, even when the world tells you otherwise. We all have dreams, we all have things we want to achieve, but the road to those dreams isn't always easy. There are obstacles, there are setbacks, and there are moments when we feel like giving up. But as Marcus and I have learned, it's the people who keep going, who keep believing, who eventually reach their goals. So, to everyone reading this, I wish you strength in your own journey. May you always have the courage to chase your dreams, and may you always have the support of the people who love you, no matter where life takes you. To my son, Marcus, you are the greatest gift I've ever received. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the hardest things are the ones that bring the greatest rewards. And to all of you, I send my warmest wishes for your health, happiness, and the love of family. May your lives be filled with the same joy, courage, and hope that Marcus has found in his. Thank you for being part of our story. And may you always find the strength to write your own. With love and gratitude, Elaine.